Hey guys, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar regarding testing and voice quality assessment solutions provided by IR. My name is George Gordon. I am the Executive Vice President of Sales at Promero. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Promero is an authorized reseller and professional services provider of what we consider to be the world's leading voice, unified communications, artificial intelligence chatbots, and speech analytics platforms on the market today. We were founded in 2001, and our team is made up of experts in these fields. Promero sells and services products from Oracle, Five9, Aspect Software, Nuance, and CallMiner, and now we added IR to our portfolio. Promero was introduced to IR when our CTO was managing a large project for Mercedes-Benz North America. Mercedes needed to assess its voice platform and network ecosystem and chose IR to conduct that specific testing activity. When our CTO shared their solution with our senior team, of which I am part of, we all agreed that IR would be a great partner for Promero. So just a little bit about IR. They are a publicly traded company with offices around the world. It is a world-class global leader of proactive experience management solutions for critical IT infrastructure and communication ecosystems. More than 1,000 organizations in more than 60 countries rely on IR to provide business-critical insights and ensure high availability and performance for millions of their customers across the globe. In today's webinar, you will learn how IR's testing and software solutions identify and help solve problems related to network resiliency, stability, performance, help monitor real-time connectivity throughout the network, measure latency to endpoints within the network, and a lot more. And of course, at the end of the webinar, there will be some time for a Q&A. So having said all this, I'd like to introduce Mike Burke. He's a director with IR. Mike will walk us through IR's testing and performance management solutions and also share his experience and successes using IR solutions to identify and solve problems for many Fortune 500 companies and perhaps for your organizations as well. Mike, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, George. Very much appreciated. And what I'd like to share with the audience here is a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. My intent is to give a brief introduction to and an overview of the IR Prognosis suite of managed testing services and licensed performance management software. And each one of these could easily be a 1 or 2 hour discussion unto themselves, but we're not doing a deep dive today. I just want to give people enough information to whet their appetites. And one of the things to keep in mind, everything behind what we do is about no surprises. The idea is to give people proactive opportunities to understand how their systems are behaving and have the information that they need to address issues when they appear. So we're going to quickly talk about active testing as a way of determining if your systems are delivering the experience you expect them to, and then talk about the specifics of active testing, what we can do from a stress test and from a heartbeat performance testing perspective. Then look a little bit into our licensed software products, UC Assessor and Path Insight, as well as Prognosis for UC. That having been said, let's dive into the details. So the IR portfolio consists of, as I said, managed testing services as well as licensed software. And in the licensed software area, we have network assessment and network forensics and management software in the form of UC Assessor and Path Insight. We have performance management software in the form of Prognosis for UC and contact center solutions. And we also have active testing, which is a cloud-based testing service. I'm going to start with the active testing and then work our way through the rest of the portfolio. So from a testing perspective, one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, how do customers experience technology, the technology that you've put in place in your contact centers and your unified communications environments? Well, what they're doing is they're making phone calls, and the technology that answers does what it's supposed to do or it doesn't. It's that simple. Does it do what people expect it to do and do it under all circumstances? And the way customers experience that technology when they want to use it is it needs to be there when they want to use it. It needs to do what they expect it to do, and it needs to work well enough that they're willing to use it instead of just start pounding zero and try to zero out. So that translates into availability, functionality, and performance. Is that technology there when it's supposed to be there? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? And does it perform well enough that people are willing to use it? So what do? Well, if you think about it, we try to do the same thing, or we do the same thing. We make automated phone calls and then let our customers know when the technology that's supposed to answer doesn't work as intended. It's that simple. Making phone calls, and we tell you whether or not they do what they're supposed to do. And we call this process the virtual customer process. And it's about active testing because we're actively creating real telephone calls that access and interact with the customer's environment, with your contact centers and your unified communications environments. These are automated test calls, but they're real telephone calls. These are not synthetic transaction. Automation allows us to do the same thing over and over again and compare the results that we collect on each test call with what we expect there to be there. And if there's something that doesn't work the way that it's supposed to, we can flag that as an error or generate an alert. The phone calls that we make are vendor agnostic. We don't care if it's a Cisco or a Mitel or an Avaya system out there. And our evaluation process is also language independent because we're looking at the energy pattern of the audio that we interact with. When you put all this together, we have a very powerful mechanism for testing the environment. And depending upon the test case that's put in place, we can delve either just into the surface, just scratch the surface with maybe a greeting-only verification, or with a test case that's more involved, we can do IVR menu penetration or auto-attendant menu penetration. And in the contact center case, all the way out to CTI screen pop out to the agent and confirm that the correct data is arriving at the agent desktop along with the telephone call itself. And the reason that this works is that if you think about a typical telephone call from start to finish, from dialing all the way through interaction with an IVR out to data retrieval, each step in the telephone call can be mapped to elements of the underlying infrastructure. And so if an issue happens at any one of these steps, for example, if a call is disconnected or if there's an extraordinarily long wait time, there's a pretty good connection between that step of the telephone call and the underlying elements of the contact center or unified communications infrastructure that's responsible for that step. And so you can map those issues that are identified by this test calling process to the underlying infrastructure and start digging in to get more details about what's going on. Now, the way we use this active calling process, there's two key types of managed services that we offer. The first is StressTest load and performance testing, and StressTest is a mechanism for generating tens or hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of concurrent telephone calls into your environment to make sure that that system actually can keep up with the rate that telephone calls are arriving at, as well as handle that absolute traffic load and make sure that the system is available and working as you expect it to work under peak load. Now, what you get when you engage IR for a stress testing engagement is you get project management and a very collaborative testing process that allows you to be in control of the testing process. And the results that we collect are published online in real time to a secure portal so that everybody has access to the test call details that we're collecting. And the test call details consist of things like recordings of the telephone call so you can actually hear what happened, and you can take a look at individual step-by-step response times and also take a look at 30,000-foot patterns of how calls are being handled by the system as traffic increases or decreases. Any variations in responses show up and are easy for you to identify, and by listening to the recordings you can hear exactly what happened. And the way this is priced, which everybody asks about, is by the number of concurrent calls and how long the test activity is intended to run. A new system implementation might require 2 to 3 hours of test calling activity, whereas a health check that's run after perhaps a patch update or perhaps just a health check that might occur in anticipation of a peak traffic, an expected peak traffic load, such as open enrollment for the insurance industry, that might only require a 30-minute to 1 hour test just to make sure that everything is set up and working properly. But as I said, the key drivers for pricing are the number of telephone calls and the duration of the test, and it's very easy to price. All we need to know is that information. Now, the results that we collect from our stress testing activity, as I said, are published online, and here's an example of some of the charts and some of the information that's available. The scatter diagrams are used to give you step-by-step response times, and by drilling down on any one of the dots on the scatter diagram, you actually have access to bar charts for individual telephone calls where you can see step-by-step response times, and you can also play that test call recording from start to finish. You decide who has access to the stress test reporting portal during the test activity. And we always encourage everybody who's got some skin in the game to participate in the stress test so you can see what's happening in real time and dig right in and know what's really happening. Now, the best practices use case for stress testing surround the phases of the contact center or unified communications lifecycle. But if you think about the lifecycle of a contact center, you've got new system installs and you've got system upgrades and expansions. And then I mentioned, pre-peak seasons and health checks. Those types of test activities are intended primarily to take a look at the capacity. Are all the carrier facilities actually provisioned, including burstability? Do all of the components in the contact center actually keep up when peak load is there? And is the system stable under peak load? We've had customers use stress testing to confirm that all of their carrier facilities are properly provisioned, and believe it or not, I would say about 1 out of every 3 stress tests identifies an issue with carrier capacity, and several of our customers run stress tests regularly to confirm that their carrier facilities are all completely provisioned, including that burstability feature. Another key application that our customers use stress testing for is to confirm that the systems are resilient under a high availability, or that their high availability architectures really do stand up if there's some kind of a problem with the environment, if there's some kind of a degradation. The way that works is we run a full load into the environment, and then faults are systematically inserted into the environment, such as disabling a network segment or shutting down a service, or maybe even taking power off of a server and watching to see what happens. We've had customers learn that under these types of scenarios, when a system starts to degrade, that their failover routing wasn't working properly, and instead of calls being transferred out to a BPO outsourced call handling facility, that were actually being routed to an announcement and disconnected, and so inbound callers wouldn't be getting the service that they're supposed to under a degraded situation. Stress testing is also really useful for unified communications environments, but now instead of IVRs and screen pop out to an agent, we're talking about validating conference bridges and perhaps auto attendant functionality. Conference bridges are the most common stress tests that we conduct in the unified communications environment. And what people learn is that they may not have enough network capacity to handle a fully loaded conference bridge environment where the calls are coming in from the outside. It's a really great way to find out ahead of time whether or not that new bridge environment that you've built, that you expect to be able to handle 400 or 500 concurrent telephone calls across 7 or 8 different bridges, can really stand up to the pressure of people coming and going, especially, as you know, with conference bridges where everybody shows up within a minute or 2 of the expected time period. Now, another key approach to doing outside-in testing using this active testing process is for validation of contact center and unified communication solutions that are actually in production and running every day. Heartbeat is what we call it, because every 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, we generate a telephone call into the environment to access and interact with that call center or unified communications technology to make sure that it's really there and doing what it's supposed to do. We're validating those 3 key features of customer experience: availability, functionality, and performance. So again, a heartbeat telephone call is an outside-in, automated, scripted telephone call That is trying to do the things that all of us do every day. Things like trying to find out when the airplane's really going to land, how much money we have in our checking account, whether or not our insurance claim has been paid off or not. So with automated test calls that are placed by our system, those test calls are paced by the system under test by that IVR or auto attendant that we're interacting with. And that allows us to measure the response time at every step of the interaction. So we're collecting information that allows us to evaluate the responses that we receive to confirm that we're hearing what we expect to hear at every particular step of the interaction. We're measuring that response time to see if the system is really working the way that it's supposed to. And we're making recordings of those telephone calls as we go. That allows us to tell you whether or not things are working the way that they're supposed to. The type of analysis that we do on the systems that we're interacting with allow us to generate immediate notifications whenever there's an issue detected, and notifications can take the form of SMS messages or emails. And the types of issues that we identified are maybe ring no answers, or calls that are just routed into a dead air situation or not connected. Carrier issues. A lot of our customers count on us to generate these telephone calls every 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, depending upon the criticality of the application that we're managing and monitoring. They count on us to make sure that the carriers are actually presenting the calls through to their technology, so that their IVRs can actually handle the calls that they're supposed to be handling. Just like with stress testing, all of the results that we collect in terms of responses, response evaluations, response times, and recordings are published in real time to a portal, so that if you get the alert at 3 o'clock in the morning and you want to know what's going on, you can log into the portal and listen to the results of that last telephone call, as well as take a look at what's been happening over the last 5 hours, 10 hours, 24 hours, whatever period makes sense to you, because the data is available online on the portal going back 90 days. And we're also publishing reports weekly and monthly that tell you exactly what was happening within your environment over the past week or the past month. And our customers use those to hold their vendors' feet to the fire as it pertains to SLA compliance. It's a really great way to know whether or not your systems are up and running 24 hours a day as you expect them to be running. And the data that you get on the heartbeat screens allows you to do individual test call investigation via the step charts and the recordings, just like with stress test. Or you can take a look again at the 30,000-foot view and see how calls are being answered, or how long calls are lasting, or individual step response times like the host step. And the scatter diagrams allow you to focus in on just the issues by clicking and filtering. It's a very powerful tool for knowing whether or not the system is working the way you expect it to, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, especially on weekends after you've gone home. Heartbeat is a great way to be able to go home with confidence. Heartbeat contact center best practices use cases include basic connectivity. Are my toll-free numbers working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Is the IVR system answering the way that we expect it to answer? And then for test cases that probe a little bit deeper into the IVR, can I actually get into the environment, enter, say, a flight number and find out when the plane's going to land, or find out if my insurance claim has been processed and I'm going to get paid? Heartbeat is a great way to make sure that the systems that you've put out there and that you expect to have working are really working the way you expect them to, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the unified communication space, as opposed to the contact center space, again, basic connectivity. Can people get through to my business? Or what we're finding lately is, can people get through to my conference bridge and actually get in and join? I just set up a heartbeat test case against a conference bridge for a customer earlier this week, and what we're learning is that about every fourth call into the environment, something goes wrong with the conference bridge PIN code entry, and the system is either reprompting for PIN codes or it's dropping the telephone call. It's pretty interesting, and it's been eye-opening for the customer to see that that's actually happening on a regular basis. Heartbeat is a great way, as I said, to know that your systems that you're counting on working really are up and working the way they're supposed to, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or if you've got a use case where all you need to do is check and make sure that your systems are ready for business in the morning, we can run through a bunch of numbers at, say, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning and make sure that you've got connectivity out to all your branches and that all of your telephone numbers are being answered by your environment. Make sure that nothing has gone bad overnight. It's a great way to alleviate somebody from having to come in a half hour early every day and make those test telephone calls to make sure that your system is up and running. And we've got customers who utilize Heartbeat for that process as well. The long and the short of it is that testing is appropriate across the entire contact center and unified communications lifecycle. Stress testing is great for go-live events and for evolutionary events where you're expanding capacity or updating your systems with patches or updating your applications. Heartbeat is a great way to keep after your systems on a 24/7 basis while you're operating them and make sure that your customers and your employees, your users, are getting the experience that you expect them to get 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from your contact center and unified communications environments. And then what I'd like to move into is the licensed software elements of the IR portfolio. And one of the first elements that I want to talk about is UCA, Unified Communications Assessor. And Unified Communications Assessor is all about understanding whether or not the network that you've put in place has got enough capacity to be able to handle the users that you expect to be on the network. Is there enough bandwidth? Will the network perform well under load, whether I'm running voice or video interactions or doing app sharing? It's again, all about no surprises. The idea is figuring out if the network that you've built can handle the traffic that you expect to put on it so that when that traffic load hits, you know that it will be handled without audio quality degradation, without video conference bridges coming and going. The only way to find out is to test it ahead of time and make sure that the system is working the way it's supposed to, and UCA is the tool for doing that. That's Unified Communications Assessor. UCA is simple to set up and use. It's downloadable from the cloud. Once you download the agents onto a server or a virtual machine in your prem, you create projects, and what's required with UC Assessor is putting this little agent in at each one of the locations where you want to be able to test to. You don't have to put agents in everywhere, but you do have to have agents at any of the nodes or at the cloud facility that your UC system is hosted on in order to be able to run traffic between them. But what happens is that you create the projects and create the traffic loads, and Unified Communications Assessor watches the traffic as it goes by and creates detailed reports that allows you to see into how well your network is performing on a segment-by-segment basis. You configure it the way that you want to in order to determine how your system is configured. It was originally developed as a Microsoft Skype for Business debugging tool, and it has been since expanded so that it can work between any provider cloud and the sites where you have your unified communications environment deployed. And you can set up comprehensive tests where there's a full mesh testing of site to site and site to cloud for every location, or you can configure it to only test and look at the links between certain elements, maybe the major data centers and some key satellite offices. It's configurable, but it gives you the kind of data that you need to know, MOS data, QoS metrics, all the information that you need to know whether or not that system is working and can handle the traffic that you're throwing at it. And another licensed software product that is often deployed with UC Assessor and is also a part of the Prognosis Performance Management Suite is Path Insight. Path Insight is a network troubleshooting and root cause isolation toolkit. What Path Insight allows you to do is take a look at what is actually happening at the network level within your communications environment. It interacts and interfaces with the network switches and routers within your environment, extracting data via SNMP that allows you to learn what's really happening. And Path Insight gives you the experience of a seasoned network engineer rolled into a software package that you can deploy and use. Path Insight and UC Assessor together allow you to do deep network analysis and very thorough troubleshooting of your environment. And what's really cool about Path Insight is that it delivers its information in easily understandable diagnostics in plain English, so you understand so you can understand what's happening and even get network prescriptions and learn about what you might need to do to fix your environment. Now, the last licensed software component that I would like to speak to is Prognosis. And as everybody knows, communications environments are complicated and complex and consist of components, whether they're hardware or software, from anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 or maybe even 20 different vendors. And every one of those elements has its own administrative and management interface. What Prognosis does is it lays over the top and collects information from those environments and allows you to get an end-to-end picture of how telephone calls are being handled and unified communications collaboration sessions are being handled within that environment. And Prognosis is a multi-vendor in that it will interact with and collect data from Cisco, Avaya, and Skype for Business environments, as well as a large number of SBCs and other elements, call recording environments within the contact center space. And Prognosis gathers this information through the various interfaces that are available. It's a probeless system, so we're not adding probes to the environment, but rather what we're doing is pulling information from all of the different interfaces that are available and then stitching that information together to provide a comprehensive end-to-end view of what's happening within your network on a call-by-call basis. And when we have access to the information that comes out of your environment, comes out of the Skype for Business environment, say, plus the Avaya PBX that you have in place, or the Cisco contact center that you have in place, what we can do is stitch together detailed information about telephone calls from one end to the other, or we can give you deep dive looks at what's happening with each one of the elements within your environment. This is an example of the type of information that's available from a Cisco environment, and this is also true for Skype for Business as well as for Avaya. The data can be presented in the form of flexible mashups. There are many canned screens that are available based on the information that is extracted from the applications and the components of the environment, but you can also customize the way you take a look at the way you look at the information, the way it generates alarms, and the way it is presented to you. And Prognosis can also be configured to interface with ITSM tools such as ServiceNow, so that you can run your alerts either directly out of Prognosis or from Prognosis into a ServiceNow type of a tool, so that you can have a single source of information about what's happening within your environment. You can take a look at, as I showed on the previous slide, a deep dive into one environment, or you can take a look at the entire ecosystem across the board. And as I said, with the flexible mashups are available, you can get data about what's happening with all the elements of your environment, with the individual servers, with the individual applications, that will allow you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on within your environment. One of the things that we can do in the SIP environment is we can stitch that data together to give you a SIP ladder for comprehensive troubleshooting capability. It's a great way to understand what's happening in your environment, and it gives you information that is key to being able to figure out what's going wrong if telephone calls aren't being handled the way that you expect them to be handled. And with our flexible live canvas presentation MO, you can build screens that represent the data in your environment the way you want to see it. Live Canvas takes Visio diagrams of the network and presents them in a way that helps you understand or helps you see what's happening within your environment the way that you want to see it. One of the really cool things about both the active testing that we have in place and Prognosis is that Heartbeat is integrated with Prognosis. Thinking back to those Heartbeat telephone calls that are placed every 5 minutes to 10 minutes into your target environment, from the Heartbeat portal, we've got a mechanism for clicking on a single button and drilling right down into the detailed results within Prognosis so that you can see what's happening on a hop-by-hop basis for those individual telephone calls. So if a Heartbeat telephone call detects that audio quality has been degraded on an interaction, simply clicking on a button that allows you to dig right into Prognosis brings you to the voice quality 360 information, hop-by-hop information about QoS and MOS scores, so that you don't have to start the process from scratch. You've got access to the ready access to the information that Prognosis has about the different elements of the environment, so you can see which switch or router or network segment might be having problems, might be perhaps stripping the SCP bits so that calls may not be getting the priority that they need to have within your environment. It's a very powerful interaction that really cuts down on the amount of time it takes to first understand that there is an issue when you think of the Heartbeat automated experience test calling, and then finding out exactly what's happening in an environment. So in summary, if you take a look at the entire Prognosis portfolio, outside-in testing, stress test, load and performance testing helps you make sure that new installs and upgrades and updates really work the way that they're supposed to, and that in advance of a peak season are ready for prime time. Stress test lets you go live with confidence. Heartbeat is that ongoing operational surveillance experience testing against production environments that lets you go home with confidence, because you know if there's an issue within your environment, Heartbeat's going to let you know by an alert. On the licensed software side of the portfolio with UC Assessor and Path Insight, you've got pre-deployment network insight, so you know whether or not the network you've built can really handle the traffic that you're going to throw at it, based on call scenarios using synthetic traffic that you can create, and it gives you a seasoned network engineer in a box that really helps people get their job done and contribute to operational efficiency. And then Prognosis gives you that single pane of glass view of what's happening in your multi-vendor environment, and it helps create clarity and insight in this world of connected devices that we're all working in. With all of this in place, what our customers tell us, and what Gartner and the Mercies have learned, is that with this kind of proactive surveillance of your environment and the detailed data extraction and stitching it all together, the cost of running a contact center and unified communications environment decreases significantly, and your IT staff becomes much more effective in doing their job. You find out that level 1 and level 2 people can perhaps do the jobs that might otherwise have required escalation to level 3 or even higher up. And when you can do this, what happens is that your operational maturity goes from being chaotic and reactive to being proactive. Our customers have reported that they've moved up the operational maturity scale, and bottom line, the cost of operation and implementation is significantly reduced when Prognosis and proactive testing are implemented in an environment. So George talked a little bit before about IR. Here's some notes about IR, just to give you again some factual representation of who we are and what we do and what kind of customers use our solutions. And IR Testing Solutions, we are a subsidiary of IR. We were, well, not subsidiary, we're a department within IR. We were formerly IQ Services, and we were purchased 3.5 years ago. And we like to provide the information through the active testing solutions that we offer that we wished we had when we were in the contact center and UC business earlier in our lives. Wish we had that kind of information so we could have gone live with confidence and known around the clock basis that things were working the way that they were supposed to. With that, I'm going to go to the Q&A part of the session. So let's see if we've got any questions that have come in yet. Let's see here. Okay, I've got a couple of questions about everything here. First one here I have is stress testing. What do I have to do, if anything, to get my system ready for a stress test? So that's a great question. There's nothing that you really need to do to get your system ready for a stress test. We're creating test calls that access your system via the public telephone network, just like you or I or anybody else would create a telephone call. And if you think about it, you know, if we want to know what our account balance is or any of the other kind of questions, you know, when's the package going to arrive, and we call into a contact center, we don't stop and think if it's a Mitel system or Aspect or Cisco, Avaya, whatever. We just make the telephone call and get the information that we want. Stress testing works the same way. We create telephone calls via the stress test that access and interact with the system from the outside in through the public telephone network. So you don't have to do anything to your system to get it ready for a stress test. And let's see here. UCA and Path Insight, what kind of results do we get when we deploy that Assessor thing? So that's a great question, and what you get is detailed reports that tell you exactly how well your network supports voice traffic, including hop-by-hop MOS and QoS metrics. And, you know, as I mentioned before, if that DSCP that is being stripped anywhere in the network, and that would affect voice quality adversely. You get, you know, in addition to the alerts that you get, you actually get prescriptions for the things that you need to do to actually fix the environment, fix the issues that are showing up in your environment. Okay. Question about Prognosis. How does it work if it's not using probes? So Prognosis is configured so that it interacts with all those information sources that are available within your UC and CC systems environments. You know, the various APIs and CDR interfaces, WMI, SNMP, and all the command line interfaces that are available. Prognosis is configured to interact with those system elements and gather data from your SBCs, from the routers and switches, from the various applications that are running within your UC or CC environment, and take a look at the data on a call-by-call basis, for example, from the point where a call comes in at the SBC all the way out to where the metrics are available, the headsets that people are using, so that you can get a comprehensive picture of how calls are being handled on a hop-by-hop and box-by-box basis within your environment. And let's see, what do I do if I want to get information or buy any of the services or software we've mentioned here? So that's easy. The information on the screen here for George Gordon, who gave us the intro at the beginning of the webinar. Contact George. Email and phone number are shown here, or go to the Promero website, and George will be able to take care of you. We're working a partnership to make sure that that we can deliver these services via the great team that Promero has assembled. Let's see here. I've got another question about stress test. How long does it take to set up a load test? So we like to have a couple of weeks so that everybody involved in the testing process knows what to expect and what's going to happen. But once we've got the phone numbers and the test cases that our equipment's going to have to dial, we can turn it around in a couple of hours. When we've worked with repeat customers who know what we need, we've been able to turn stress tests around in as little as 2 hours. Because again, what we're doing is making telephone calls and telling you what happens, and what we really need to know is how those calls are supposed to navigate the environment on the environment and the target systems. And once we know that, we can easily configure our systems to generate those telephone calls, publish the results to the website, and give you the kind of information that you need to know whether or not your systems are going to work, so you can go live with confidence. Okay, and right now, that's it for the questions. So, George, unless you've got anything else that you would like to add to close things off, I'm going to sign off for today.
No, but I think we're good, Mike. Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, everybody out there. Give us a call or send us an email, and we'll get back to you and let you know how things are going. Take care, and have a great day, everybody. Thanks for watching.